country. Harping on the wars we fight, griping about the way things ought to be. And I don't mind them switching sides and standing up for things they believe in. When they're running down our countrymen, they're walking on the fighting side of me.
And that's Merle Haggard, The Fighting Side of Me. This is the first time that I have not opened up with Metallica Seek and Destroy in a few years. But I wanted to get something different out there. And I do I do pay homage, if you will. That's the best way of saying that. I do pay homage to Merle in No More Lies, Freedom Reserve, No More Lies, a Trine Day publication that you can pre-order right now in Books A Million. Please do so. Buy a couple copies, one for yourself, one for a friend. It's real close to printing. It may have been printed, I don't know, but I haven't received word. But as of about 9 weeks ago, we were real close. So printer has had manuscript for a couple months. We're getting real close. Freedom Reserve, No More Lies. Worked on that for 4 years. Look, and I'm starting on a second book. So I hope to have that out come fall. All right. So hopefully within the next 9 months. Today is January 8th. I do weekend editions once in a while, Sunday. Coming up, folks, coming up this week, I will be hosting a very incredible author. You know, typically I host real great people. I simply do. I've been very fortunate. Robert Bruce Spencer, who's the founder of jihadwatch.org. He's a 2 times New York Times bestselling author, anti-Muslim blogger, key figure of the counter-jihad movement, and he's a graduate of UNC Chapel Hill. That's some of what I know about Robert. And his newest book, called The Sumter Gambit. This is pretty serious stuff here. It's The Sumter Gambit: How the Left is Trying to Foment a Civil War. That is the title of his book. Robert Bruce Spencer. He'll be joining me Wednesday for a discussion of truth. And wow, what a week it's been in DC politics. I exhort each and every one of you. I just simply do encourage all of you to get involved in any way that you possibly can in some of these very dramatic issues that are facing the country today, and definitely in your local communities. Go to school board meetings, get involved with local council meetings. You know, if you're at the state level, whatever it may be, just get your voice out there. Big tech censorship is out of control. I've been working with socialmediafreedom.org now for a year and a half, and simply just off of my efforts. Now, I don't make money doing this. I've been doing this going on 7 years now. I'm in my 7th year with Discussions of Truth. It started in 2016 in Miami because of the Zika virus, and I'm no different than you. I simply am no different than you, and I've just made the decision in my life to serve my country. Right, I never joined the military, not because I don't believe in self-defense or national defense, because I do strongly. I just simply never believed in the wars, Iraq, Afghanistan. I never believed in those. Vietnam, I never believed in those wars. And fortunately enough, I've dedicated the past 6 years to digging into what is the deep state? Where does it come from? Unfortunately, and I'm going to lay some of these things out for you here in this episode, as I have in the past, so that you understand the timeline and the chronological kind of ladder. For me, it was being exposed to the Zika virus. I saw the Rockefeller involved in the virus and the pesticide. I was then turned on to a guy named Anthony Sutton, that had walked away from his fellowship at the Hoover Institute, Stanford, because he was exposing the corruption behind the Bush family. This was in the early 70s, Prescott Bush, Union Bank. And he's talking about the Skull and Bones Society. Of course, if you mention the word Illuminati, you're quickly diffused as a conspiracy theorist. But the problem, the issue here is that it's not a conspiracy theory. The Illuminati is a legitimate organization. Now, whether it still exists, I don't know. But the founding fathers spoke about the Illuminati. It's found in papers that Jefferson wrote, Washington. This is a Bavarian network brotherhood adapted by Adam Weishaupt in the 1700s, right? So right around the time of the mid to late 1700s. So the it is supposed that the American branch of this society resides at what is called as the Skull and Bones at Yale University. Now, if you backtrack with the Illuminati, then the predecessor of the Illuminati was something called the Alumbrados, the Spanish Alumbrados. The Alumbrados was an organization that Saint Ignatius de Loyola studied, and Saint Ignatius of Loyola, of course, was injured in a battle of Pamplona. This is French-Spanish battle, and he dedicated his life to creating what became known as the Society of Jesus, which are otherwise known as the Jesuits. Now, the Jesuits are a military order. They are a military order that is their prime goal and existence to invade and conquer countries. They were set up in the 1500s to counter Martin Luther's Reformation. They were a counter-Reformation concept, and in England, for instance, and I argue in America, what they did is they infiltrated an education system. So early on in Discuss the Truth, in the first year and a half, I believe it was, from 2 years, Charlotte Isabich was a guest on my program. She's recently passed away. Charlotte wrote a book called The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. Her father was a member of the Skull and Bones, as she discovered in his waning months, maybe a couple years. I don't know. She was taking care of him as he was dying, or getting close to death. And she was terminated, right? So she was fired by the Reagan administration for opposing something called BEST, a Betterment of Education through Science and Technology. She wanted parents to have more say over the curriculum, and that was being shifted out of a program out of Seattle. If I get this right, I haven't listened to the episode. I haven't listened to the episode actually since I recorded with her. I don't remember what was said. It's been 5 years, probably 4.5. But she wanted technology to not advance in regards to what kids were being taught in public schools, right? Or manipulate that, whatever that was arranged out of Seattle. So anyway, so she wrote the book after being terminated and kicked out of the Reagan administration. And this is a person of high credit, right? High credentials, of the aristocratic kind of class, if you will, in DC. And the book is incredible. I flipped through it. I exhort you to definitely go through it. The deliberate dumbing down of America. So anyway, so the Jesuits, with Georgetown, for instance, is the oldest Jesuit institution in the country. It's the feeder into DC politics. The Jesuits, this is what they are trained to do. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. They conquer a country by the inside out. Okay. So anyway, so Merle Haggard, and that is exactly what each of you listening to this, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me. This is what each of you and each of us need to be doing, is need to be holding our ground firmly. This country has been invaded. Make no mistake about it. The issue is you must identify where the invasion is coming from, because I'm telling you, it's not coming from China. The Chinese have not invaded this country. Have they bought up? Are they competing with the United States on an economic scale? Absolutely. Are they competing with America on a military scale? Absolutely. This is my thought on China. The Chinese have took them 400 years to build a wall to protect themselves from invasion. This is culturally, historically, this is a non-invasive peoples. The Chinese people are not aggressive in that manner. The Russians may be, but not to the extent. The aggressive, historically, African Americans, these are not aggressive people. And by the way, when you buy my book, I explain Freedom Reserved, No More Lies. I explain to the African American community where the modern slave trade incepted. That is the transatlantic slave trade, where it incepted. And I list I list the papal bulls. They're called papal bulls. PAPAL, papal bulls, BULL. This is legislation handed down from the Pope. The slave trade, the modern slave trade, they brought African Americans to the Americas, primarily via the Portuguese and the Spanish, but of course, obviously through what became American trading companies. Um, these are all based off of papal bull. These are Roman laws. So it has nothing to do. It has absolutely nothing to do with the United States and its culture and its constitution. Slavery has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the financing behind, in that respect, the American Revolution and the Continental Congress, the Continental Army. So that's one thing that I talk about in my book when you buy my book. The other thing that I fold in is when you look at the American flag, and I don't want to jump around too much. I want to get back to the topic that I want to talk about. When you look at the American flag, this is a flag that resembles and is almost identical. The initial flag is called the U.S. Grand Union flag. That was the first flag of the Continental Congress or Continental Army. That is a flag of the British East Indies Company, a trading company. America didn't finance itself to battle King George and the English. Okay, it was financed by, I argue, it was financed by the City of London. Okay, and the City of London is a non-British entity. Okay, and it bears the name, but the name London comes from the Roman name Londinium. London and the City of London, where the Bank of England resides, which is partially controlled by the Parliament, but the City of London is controlled by Switzerland and therefore through Rome. Okay, the City of London controls the monarchy. The City of London finances the monarchy's military. That's how that structure is set up, and that's exactly what was adopted and happened in the United States in 1913 with the Federal Reserve Act. All right, so I'm hoping if this is your first time listening to me talk, then I'm hoping you're kind of grabbing some of these things. So what's happening right now on the border? I want to go into that a little bit, and then I want to give my remarks on what's happened in D.C. the past week. Um, so, uh, so, 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 in retrospect, however, if you look at the United States, you know that the federal government is in a 30 plus, was it 31 point something, 30 plus $trillion debt. It's rapidly skyrocketing. Okay, Trump didn't help it. Obama didn't help it. The Bushes didn't help it. Clinton didn't help it. Clinton's probably the one president of the past 40 years that did help it the most. Um, Biden has certainly not helped it. Carter didn't help it. The last president that tried to do something about it was assassinated in broad daylight, JFK. All these other presidents have simply been puppets. Who are they? Who are they puppets of? Who are the bankers that are controlling the finance of the federal government? Because look, if it all came down to Microsoft and eBay and Amazon, if it came down to these big tech companies, Google, then okay, let's get some resources paid together. Let's give them bonds, and let's get this federal debt paid off. Why isn't the federal debt paid off? I was in. It's probably been over a year and a half now, closer to 2 years. Maybe it's been 2 years. Been close to 2 years. It's been probably 2 years now. Maybe it's 2 years. January. I don't recall. But I'm sitting down in a hotel. Happened to be the Trump Plaza. I don't know. It's on Constitutional Avenue. I think. I'm sitting down in a hotel in the lobby. Trump International, maybe it's called. It's real close, about 3 blocks from the White House. And I'm talking to Pete Sessions, and I'm saying, Pete, why is it that regardless of political affiliation, so it's Obama, it was Trump, regardless of political affiliation, foreign policy doesn't change, and national debt only continues to skyrocket. He says, there's a really good point. A lot of us up on the Hill are talking about that. Well, you know what? This past week, not even a session, now a session, but this past voting process here, these sessions of voting, that was brought up, and that is brought up. You've got a debt ceiling that must be limited. They cannot continue to grow that. And so therefore we're getting back to what, like 2011, where there was brought on a financial crisis. Okay. In order to right the ship, there's going to be stormy weather. There's going to be waves. What repercussions? What size waves we deal with, we don't know. But here's the thing, here's the thing, and a lot of people don't want to look at this. But I can't remember her name, but she's a commentator, a doctorate out of Princeton. First name's Lauren. I don't remember the last name. She's basically kind of saying, well, we can just continue borrowing, borrowing, borrowing. And I hear these people talk about this all the time. Well, we'll just continue increasing the debt ceiling. No, you cannot continue to increase the debt ceiling. You must get a hold of government spending. There must be a budget that's met, and you must start paying off this federal debt. But what's more important here is this. Okay, those are all things that are manageable. Those are all things that are manageable. What's more important here is discovering who holds that debt. So who the United States is in debt to? Certainly Chinese-owned bonds, Russians, some of these kind of conventional military enemies or non-allies. Certainly, yes, they're a threat. Okay, but the Federal Reserve System, which regulates the basically the economy, the U.S. economy, is subservient to, from my understanding. Now you can write me, you can post a comment. Subservient to something called the Bank of International Settlements out of Switzerland. Okay, the U.S. Federal Reserve is a central bank. It's subservient. It's regulated by the Bank of International Settlements out of Switzerland. Again, I'm kind of approaching these things from a layman, a very elementary, very basic knowledge. But I am looking at things kind of black and white. What do we know, right? So what do we know? We know the country has a massive federal debt that only continues to skyrocket, regardless of political party that sits in the Oval Office. Okay, we know that. We know that foreign policy remains unchanged. Okay, we know these things, and so we're just trying to harness what's happening. And I'll get into the border because the border issue does thread into this. I'll get into that in a minute. But let's get into the 118 Congress. You had a highly suspect election. There's a book. I've mentioned it in other casts. There's a book by the Collier brothers, Collier, the Collier brothers. They wrote it primarily in Florida, in Miami, from my understanding, and it's called Vote Scam. VOTESCAM, Vote Scam. And it talks about how IBM, big tech, big media have colluded to sway presidential elections going back to LBJ. So if you say, okay, LBJ, so JFK was the last, and this is arguable that any president has actually been completely legitimately democratically fairly elected. We don't know, but if you take, okay, JFK being the last that was for the most part democratically elected, then all of these other presidents have been put into place as puppeted. They've been puppeted into place. And therefore, that makes sense that you've got two Bushes because they have this same identical economic regime to use the military to go in and control oil in the Middle East. For who? For Ford, for GM, for these big American companies, for Rockefeller oil companies, right? That all feed into the City of London and this old banking line. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is fact. Here's another fact. The Federal Reserve Act it doesn't align with the U.S. Constitution. In fact, the U.S. Constitution calls for the coining money, and the founders of the country are known, many of them are known to be quoted as not wanting paper money. Okay, yeah, I mean, I don't want to walk around with a bunch of change in my pocket. It's very easy to just swipe a card. I'm not opposed to a digital transaction, but like the former CEO and founder of Overstock has said on my program, you must have it convertible to something of intrinsic value. There must be something convertible to intrinsic value if you're going to have that digital transaction. Of course, it makes great sense to have the digital transaction. It makes it easy for everyone. Don't get me wrong. I use debit card, credit card all the time. Okay. But again, there must be something. There must be something in the coffers, right? There must be something in the vault. Does the United States have any gold? Not according to Dr. Peter Beter, Beter, in the 70s, the mid 70s. He was talking about this. He's a former Kennedy advisor. He said that the gold was sold to the IMF, International Monetary Fund. That the United States doesn't actually own gold. We know this. The Federal Reserve doesn't own any gold. We know that. We know that they've said that they don't have any gold. Okay, so they are just regulators. Well, who owns the gold? Who owns? If you want to cash in your chips, you go into the casino. You want to cash in your chips. You want to walk out with something, right? You're gonna go buy. You're gonna go buy your champagne with the chips. At the hotel next door, and you might be able to You might be, I don't know, you get my drift, right? You're not gonna go buy. You're not gonna buy a plane ticket home with chips. You got to get something. You got to get that converted into currency. Okay. So that's the idea. But anyway, so if we go, I keep going back to the banking line because this is really what's strangling this country. It's really you can go into G. Edward Griffin. There's simply a lot of people that you can start looking at that talk about this historically. This is what destroys a nation, a debt. And even John Adams has said the enemy of a nation is first the sword and second the debt. Something of that nature is what he says. And he might even allude to debt being more harmful to a nation than the sword. I can't remember the exact quote, but I do quote it in a couple of my articles on my website, iantrottier.com. So that is the most pressing problem in this country, in this nation, and to its foreign security, in my opinion, is its debt. You got to get those debt paid off. But more importantly, again, as I said, you got to identify who the debtor is. Who's this country indebted to? So the Federal Reserve is controlled essentially by the Bank of International Settlements. Who's controlling the Bank of International Settlements? Right. So that's going to get us into talking about immigration. So we got a 118th Congress. It took, what was it? Did it take 4? It took 4 days. 4 days to get McCarthy in. I talked to some people. Some people like McCarthy. Some people don't like McCarthy. I personally never met him. I know that Trump has been a supporter of McCarthy for months. I was at an AFPI event in D.C. Probably 6 months ago, and he was very much supporting McCarthy then. I don't know. McCarthy's got a Bakersfield, California. Like I said, I don't really follow him. I don't know what his politics are. But I do know that a number of the representatives are going down to the border right now. I do know that, and Biden is supposedly in El Paso as I speak right now. He's been in office for 2 years. This is his first time at the border, and he's only going to the border because it seems to be his convenience. He's going to the border because he's going to meet with the president of Mexico and the president of Canada in Mexico City. Okay. So what does that allude to? Again, that alludes to this whole kind of Mexico, U.S., Canada, one kind of region power. And who does that benefit? Does it benefit America? It could benefit America on trade, But again, if you're approaching this from a global institution, it's more of a kind of a United Nations anthem, right? So Biden's going on the border because it's on his way down to Mexico City. That's how I see this. Does he really care what's going on the border? No, he doesn't really care what's going on the border. I'm going to save that issue in a minute. But I'm going to return to 118th Congress. The reason the 118th Congress took 15 votes, was it 15 votes, 14, 15 votes? The reason it took so many votes to get in is because the House Freedom Caucus. The House Freedom Caucus is made up of, has 20 representatives. I think there's 21. One of them would always vote present. But primarily the 20 that would continually nominate somebody outside of McCarthy, including Matt Gaetz nominated Trump at least once. Lauren Boebert would nominate Donaldson. These other people would get nominated. So that was what was stalling McCarthy from getting the 218 threshold. And of course, it turned out to be a 216 threshold because the remaining six of this kind of coalition held out and all voted present, which gave the majority of 216 to pass. McCarthy got the gallows around midnight, probably January 7th by that time. But what are the issues here that were stalling McCarthy from getting in? Well, is McCarthy deep state? What does it mean to be deep state? Trump is supporting McCarthy. Do you think Trump is deep state? I've met Trump in an indirect way. I'd met his daughter. It's on my website, it's in my book. I met his daughter. I'd introduced the daughter to the Google whistleblower, and I told her to take the message to the father. Father came in after his NBC town hall in down on Biscayne Bay. This is in Miami. He walks up to Google whistleblower. Zach and exchanges some pleasantries, calls him an American hero. He pivots. There's probably 200 people in the room. He pivots, points at me, calls me a prize fighter, walks up to me. I go to shake his hand. He walks past me. I guess he doesn't like to shake hands. Anyway, I didn't know that. But I didn't actually exchange any words with him, but I met him in that sense indirectly. But he has been a supporter of McCarthy. Is Trump deep state? I don't know. Is he part of the Great Reset? I don't know. We openly have former Prince, now King Charles, calling for the digital Great Reset. You know, remember these during these lockdowns with this virus being used as a cover, in my opinion, for this digital reset via the technological advances in through vaccines. Um, and you're going to find that on my website. Just click on the article that I've renamed National Suicide, and that's after Anthony Sutton's book, National Suicide: How the Country Continues to Basically Kill Itself with its debt. And this is what Sutton was writing. I think that book was probably published in the 90s. You'll see that the Learned Elders of Zion, who I contest are Jesuits, as stealth. These are stealth people. These are undercover. They're hidden. They move at night in that sense. They called for, and it's been over 100 years, they've called for this inoculation of the masses. So the technology seemingly has existed to kind of create this digital global economy. Has it been at play for 100 years? All right, so I want you to start thinking historically. If you listen to me and you talk, if some of these things reside with you and you're like, okay, this makes sense, I want you to start thinking historically. Historically, the United States is a very young country, and I'm going to get back to 118th Congress, and I'm going to get into immigration, and then I'll wrap it up. But for instance, the 10 oldest companies in the world, if you just pop that into your search browser, what you might get is a result that I've gotten, which is at oldest.org. The 10th oldest company in the world is actually a bell manufacturer. Yes, located in Italy. Now think bells, Italy, church, state. Think about the Americas. Think about the New World. Think about Christopher Columbus. Think about these people. Think about these people that came to the Americas, slaughtered the natives, forced them to accept this religion, their quote salvation. It's for your benefit, in the name of God, in the name of Jesus Christ. Accept my religion. And then you would basically this. I mean, this happened, right? This happened in Mexico, at least, and it all throughout. They would destroy these villages and literally build their churches in the center of the villages. This is what happened. This is what the conquistadors, this is what the conquerors, the Spanish, Portuguese conquerors did, and to a degree, the English conquerors. But the England is a little bit different. So the America is a little bit different, right? But so certainly a bell manufacturer, this company has been around for almost 1,000 years, folks. This Italian bell manufacturer, and they manufacture bells for churches, has been around for 978 years. It was founded in 1040. That's like Knights of Malta. Okay, the Knights of Malta date back to about that time. The Knights of Malta. Okay, this is old, old, old stuff. These people have been in business for centuries, millennia, right? Centuries. Okay, this is real. So is this company that makes bells, is this older than the country of the United States? Oh yeah, it's like 5 times as older. Well, excuse me. Yes, it's almost 4 times as old. Right? It's almost 4 times as old as the country of the United States. Just think about that. Think about that. Let that sink in. Let that compute in your brain that there is a company that makes bells located in Italy that is almost 4 times as old, almost 1,000 years. It's been around. It's 4 times older than the United States. Okay? Think about that. Follow the money, folks. Follow the money. And see, I'm torn because I don't want to belittle anybody. I don't want to belittle religion. I don't want to belittle anybody's belief in religion. I don't want to belittle what anybody believes is God or their interpretation of God. This is the great beauty of the United States, right? The freedom of religion, this kind of cohesion. Oh, here, let's share some food, like Thanksgiving, right? Let's meet. You're different. You wear different clothes. You speak a different language. Let's meet at a table. Let's share food. Let's enjoy one another's company. Let's learn from each other. That's the United States. That is the epitome of the United States. All these different people, cultures, languages, foods, um, brought together, right? Brought together in harmony, in love, in care. That is the greatness of the United States, right? That is the beauty. But see, as I follow this line, if as I follow this road, all roads lead to Rome, ladies and gentlemen. All roads lead to Rome. The name of this company that's been making bells for almost 1,000 years is called the Marinelli Bell Foundry. The Marinelli Bell Foundry. Okay, one of the other oldest companies makes religious goods. They're based in Japan. Uh, But see here, this is where I differ. The Asian cultures have not. They've not. Here, take this for instance. The Chinese, right? Where does gunpowder come from? Gunpowder. If you take a gun and you fire it, you have the right to bear arms. That gunpowder was invented for fireworks in China. It's a Chinese invention. Gunpowder essentially is basically a Chinese invention. The Chinese invented it to blow up fireworks to celebrate. Okay, they didn't invent gunpowder using guns. They used gunpowder, or they used this explosive powder, this powder that ignites, in other words, for a celebratory um, means, not for aggressive, violent means. This is a European usage of this powder to use it in guns to explode bullets. Okay, so here you have the Chinese, you have the Japanese. These are historically, again, approaching this from a historical concept or aspect. Historically, the Japanese have not been an aggressive country. Okay, oh Ian, World War II, they bombed Pearl Harbor. Okay. Yeah, did they? Or was that set up? I don't know. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so they bombed Pearl Harbor. Oh, Ian, the kamikazes. Okay, so where are the Japanese been in the Iraq War? Okay, right? They've been trying to conquer Iraq. They've been trying to conquer Afghanistan, right? I mean, this is yeah. So again, it's a religious. So historically, what has been man's kind of main um, uh, 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 ideological challenge, right? It is theoretical. It's theological. It's theological. It is the interpretation of existence, right? Okay. So bells, and we've got religious goods from the Shumiya uh, Shinbutsu Butsugitten. Some Japanese word. Pardon me. Company. That's two of the 10 oldest companies on the planet. They've been around for almost 1,000 years. Here's a company, the Chateau de Goulaine. It's been around. It was founded in 1000 AD. Right, it's been around for over 1,000 years. It's a winery, um, a French winery, and then two of the other oldest companies are mints that manufacture currency. One is in France, and one is in England. Here's the Royal Mint. It was founded in 886 AD. It's 1,132 years old. Like I just told you, the word Londinium is a Roman word. Okay, it's a Roman word. What has been around? So what is the constant? What is the constant? When I step back and I look at this, and again, it's non-denominational and it's non-partisan. Uh, I step back and I look at what is the one main power that has been and currently and continues to be in power in a major way for over 2,000 years, and that is Rome. That is Rome. It is Rome. Okay, so now you're understanding my approach to understanding where the deep state comes from. The deep state is very sophisticated, it's very complex, it's hidden in plain sight, and it's very well engineered. And is it taking down America? Its goal, its mission is to destroy this country. That is my opinion. Okay, it does not want the United States or wants to conquer the United States. I believe that the United States has been invaded and it is very close to being conquered. That's my opinion. Okay. So 118th Congress, but the reason I wanted you to look at some of these old historic companies that have been around for almost 1,000 years, over 1,000 years, is because I want to give you context. 250 years, the United States, just generalize here. 250 years is an infant. You take that Royal Mint. It's been around, founded in 1000 AD. Uh, the United States is an infant. It's an infant. It's a child. The United States is a child, and it's being suffocated. It's not doing well, folks. It's not doing well. It's not growing. It's not being nurtured. Okay, it is not being fed. This is a child that is in danger. Okay, but that's what I wanted you to get, is to get a historical context when you view these things. Look at what's happened. Look at what may be the global powers that could still be in existence that might be possibly trying to take down your country. And that's what I personally come up with. So I urge you and exhort you to adopt the same type of ideology, and that's completely your choice whether you do so or not. But there were three kind of key things that these members of the House Freedom Caucus were wanting. And I know that Jim Jordan was, I think he basically always supported McCarthy, but Mark Meadows, no longer a acting politician, was not, and those are two of the founders, I think, with Ron DeSantis, of the Freedom Caucus. Um, you got Matt Gaetz and Boebert. Biggs is another one. Good is another one. Some of these other politicians, the part of this Freedom Caucus, they were holdouts, right? Why? Because McCarthy, some reason, was not accepting some of these terms that these people wanted. So, and that is a reflection of likely you. So, if you were, for instance, if you were a Trump supporter, right, and you do believe that there is a voting issue, voting fraud in this country, then you resemble likely one of 80 million people that I feel voted for Donald Trump, right? And you are likely of my opinion that he should be, because he was the elected president. Okay, but we all kind of saw the numbers on the TV screens, and they reversed and they changed, and Biden ended up in office. Okay, yeah, it just so happens that Biden is the second Catholic president. Do you realize, for instance, and again, I hate to make this about religion, but that does seem to be it does seem to be where these roads are leading. Rome is all about a religion. It's a city built on religion. Okay, if you take, for instance, the holiday Christmas, which is Christ Mass. You go to a Catholic church and you have Mass, and it's a Mass for Christ, right? What is it? You listen to, so a guy, Jordan Maxwell, joined my show 2020. I think it was January 2nd, 2020, and he talks about these types of things all the time. There's a number of people that do, but he talks about basically how Christmas is simply essentially a pagan worship of the winter solstice. That's what Christ Mass is, Christmas. And as a matter of fact, I think for the first roughly 50 years of the existence of the United States, that means after 1776, for the first summer 40, 50 years, Christmas wasn't even an official holiday. Because, like, for instance, in Boston, it was illegal to celebrate it. Okay, this is a Roman holiday, ladies and gentlemen. This is a Roman holiday. But there are three elements, right? So again, I'm saying, what I'm telling you is that the Freedom Caucus, if you are of the opinion that there is voter fraud in this country, and certainly the Collier brothers vote scam, that book's at least 10 years old, have mentioned that there's been voter fraud for decades in this country, then yes, it's incredibly likely that there was massive voter fraud under the Trump administration. Okay. Um, was his first election manipulated? Yeah, that's a good question, right? That's a very good question. But so what I'm telling you is that if you're part of those 80 million, then you're part of those people, those holdouts that were reluctant to get McCarthy into power, because they resemble you, ladies and gentlemen. They reflect you. They're in power because of you. You put them there. So your hard work, like things that I'm doing, like you listening, or maybe you've got your own talk show or podcast, or you're writing your own books, or you're contacting, you're doing your own work. Your work is making a difference. to try to clean up the mess in the country. Okay, um, so it's not a threat. You know, many Democrats. I'll read a quote by Omar Elon Omar, and her thoughts are this. She says she's quoted as saying, "McCarthy just agreed to a deal with far right insurrectionists." So she's calling Matt Gaetz, she's calling Lauren Boebert, she's calling these people far right insurrectionists. I mean, that's absurd. That's absolutely absurd, right? That's absurd. They're legitimately voted again, yeah, legitimate or not, but they're voted politicians. They're in the seat because people want them there. People like you, perhaps, want them there. Far right that would hold the entire U.S. and global economy hostage. Okay, and you know my there's very little respect, right? I mean, there's very little respect um, for working with. This is the deliberate divide. I just said deliberate. The deliberate divide is happening in the country. The divide and conquer. It's a deliberate divide. The fact that an independent, you know, I mean, an independent, basically, you're going nowhere if you get into politics. If you're part of the Green Party, you're not. You know, you're going to garner what 7% of the votes. Cynthia McKinney, for instance, former guest on the program, you know, you've got to be one or the other to go anywhere. And it's been that way because that's how the country's been shaped over the past many decades, right? I mean, you know, the Democrat Republican parties are roots of the Democrat Party being the older of the two. These are old parties, of course. Uh, but anyways, what those holdouts resemble were you and your desire, especially if you're in Arizona, because I know Arizona is very active in this. Texans are very active in this. Your desire to bring forth the truth behind voter fraud and this invasion, what I call invasion. Okay, um, so first off, this caucus wants the FBI investigated, right? How do you get away? How do you send the FBI into Mar-a-Lago and raid a president's house? Okay, former president. You know, that's an abuse of a federal agency. Okay, so they wanted that. Another thing they wanted was the immigration issue, the border issue addressed, and then the other issue is that they wanted a motion to vacate reinstated, which is what Pelosi got rid of, which basically means anybody in the chamber in Congress can vote to get the speaker removed. Something of that. It's very vague. That's a very vague explanation, but that's kind of the gist of what I understand of what's called the motion to vacate. So those kind of three elements were not adopted by McCarthy initially, or some of them. Or excuse me, not immigration. It was a guarantee of seats, right? So now the House Freedom Caucus has something like three guaranteed seats on a very important committee, which don't recall off the top of my head. One of the security committees, I believe, it's incredibly important security. So those are guaranteed. So it's kind of these kind of brokers, if you will, members of the Freedom Caucus were holding out to broker these guarantees to get McCarthy in. And I'm going to tell you, folks, I spent the weekend. Today is Sunday evening. I spent, as of Thursday night, and I've got a couple of responses. I spent my time emailing these Congress people, the staff of the Congress people, sending them emails, um, telling them either I supported what they were doing and or what I wanted them to do. Okay, so just kind of basically being a voice, right? And that's what I'm asking you to do is be a voice, get out there, get involved, because you can make a difference. You absolutely can. I've been doing this since 2016. I've been doing the show since January of 2017. This is now the seventh. It's the seventh season, if you will. And I don't do this for money. I don't get paid. I do this voluntarily. I've been doing this because I believe in it and I know that it must be done. I do this off of my own free will and my own bank account. I live very humbly. I live incredibly humbly, and it's just work that must be done. But through my efforts, I've met the president's daughter. I've met Governor DeSantis a couple times. I've met Kristi Noem a few times. I've met Matt Gaetz. I've met Kathy McMorris Rogers. I've met Jim Jordan. I've been on the phone just recently, just 2 weeks ago. I was on a phone conference call with the office of Ted Cruz and a number of other great activists, politicians, um, local and state, or rather, local, state, and federal, and doctors, professionals of one way or the other. I met some really amazing and great people, and this is exactly what you can do. Um, but you have to be able to do it. You have to start doing it, and nothing changes overnight. Okay, nothing changes overnight. I've been working on my book for 4 years. It's not printed yet. Like I said, I don't make an income off of this. I do this for you. I do this because it needs to be happen. It needs to happen. And if I don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. That's the point of view that I personally take, and that's a point of view that you should also personally take. Um, so finally, I believe it was the 15th vote. It was the 14th, 15th. Finally, the McCarthy gets voted in, and we have a clear divide. It's a slim majority that the Republicans have in Congress, but there's a clear divide, and the philosophies are so staunchly opposite of one another. And unfortunately, I'm just going to say it: the Democrats do not seem to be supporting the great things that America's built on. And I'm opposed to that. I'm highly opposed to that. Like I said, 250 years, that's not a lot of time. Okay. Yes, there have been great things that the United States has adopted to make it a great country that were not law when the country was developed. So yes, there can be things that can be met to make the country greater. But I do personally believe that some of these things are out of control. So let's get into the border. The border has been out of control for 2 years now. I mean, I grew up in California, and there was illegal immigration going on back then. That was a few decades ago, and so illegal immigration has been a problem for a long time. But as of recent, with the COVID thing and these caravans and these economic shutdowns, it's become an increasing problem. And with sources open society, it now seems like it's boiling over. So I want you to look at two things in regards to the immigration policy. If you are going to invade a country, okay, and you take, for instance, this Protestant Puritan foundation that the United States was founded upon. Now, the Mayflower, right? The Mayflower and the William Penn. These William Penn, of course, came 150 years after the Mayflower. I'm not putting the two together, but what I'm saying is that the formation of the United States came together from the root of the Mayflower, which meant a desire to have a civil government under freedom of religion. So you respect people's varying religions. Now, Judeo-Christian principles were used to create that and write that Constitution, and it's produced the most beautiful governing document ever created by man, in my opinion, U.S. Constitution. But what you have here, you have some of these. What would be the enemy then? What is an enemy? If you want to govern under a combination of church and state, which is what England ran for hundreds of years prior to Henry VIII, and here's the argument: is that Henry VIII's Church of England, which still resides, is only simply economically controlled by Rome. It never actually gained its financial independence because the City of London controls it, and the City of London is not part of England. It's subservient to Rome via Switzerland. Okay. So, what is the enemy to a separation of church and state? What is that enemy? Well, historically, definitely, absolutely, that is the Vatican. And I'm not saying the Vatican is united. There's been power struggles within the Vatican. The Farnese family, Alejandro Farnese, who became Pope Paul, that adopted the Society of Jesus. You have the Alder Bandini family. The Rothschilds are married into. You have the Orsini. Pepe Orsini is considered the gray pope today. You had the Italian Revolution. I believe this happened just after World War II, right? You had this divide in where the Pope was confined to the Vatican for many decades. Again, I've written about some of this other stuff, and the thing is, I don't recall when I regurgitate sometimes, but you have these power struggles within you. So that's where this kind of black nobility comes. You have these power struggles with these old ancient families that have produced popes in their history, the Medici family that have helped finance the Renaissance. So then if you take that historic approach, then you can see some of these companies that still exist, they've been in business for 1,000 years. They were in business during the time of these, and they're still in business during the time of some of these families I've just mentioned to you. And the great unifier, therefore, if you're an enemy to a separation, if you're an enemy to a separation of church and state, who could you possibly be? And I'm telling you that right now, from my research, all roads lead to Rome. Okay, and I'm not saying I don't like Italy, I don't like Rome. I'm not saying that. Within the Roman hierarchy, there are clear divides. Archbishop Vigano wrote to Trump saying that the COVID thing was a hoax. Okay, he's 80 years old. This is a guy that's been around Rome for a while. Some of these people know what they're talking about. Okay, um, so let's go back to the border. If you're going to invade a nation and you're going to do it, and people don't know you've been invaded, okay, that's what a spy is basically called. And you're going to foment and build and expand your network, and it becomes increasingly more powerful and powerful because it remains hidden. One way to do that is by controlling the education system. We've already mentioned that. Christ College at Oxford is an example of that. It's created by Thomas Wolsey, Archbishop of England, and officially recognized by Henry VIII. That is Christ College at Oxford. And Wolsey was a Jesuit, to the best of my knowledge. Is that I'm not sure if that's accurate. I may be off on that. But again, that is the goal of the Jesuit, is to infiltrate the education system. So if the United States education system, a la Charlotte Iserbyt, has been invaded by the Jesuits, for instance, Georgetown, Fordham, I'm just throwing out some thoughts here. Then what's another tactic of invasion? Again, controlling an education system is a tactic of invasion, and manipulating, brainwashing, teaching people how to think. Media is another one. And all you Fox News listeners, founder of Fox News was Murdoch, was actually knighted by the Pope. He received the Knight of St. Gregory, I think it's called. Okay, so outside of education, you can consider media. But what's happening right now on the border? There's a guy named Eric John Phelps. He's a former guest of mine. He came on the same day, about a year and a half ago. He came onto my show with Brian Artis. And Eric John Phelps is a guy that I listen to because he takes this kind of theological institution approach to governing and dominating and invading in this context. Okay, and these are harsh words, but this is what we're looking at. We're looking at some very unprecedented times right now, possibly. Okay, so if you are therefore going to open up the borders and flood it with people illegally that are not part of that functioning culture, they're from a different culture that's non-functioning, it's dysfunctional, then you're going to lower the quality of that society just by allowing those people in. Just by allowing those people in, you're going to lower that quality. Okay, I mean, yeah, let's take things on a very elementary scale. If you're going to break the law, you're going to trust that person doesn't go into the society. Oh yeah, sure, let's give them shoes, let's give them food. All right, so fine. But you're going to trust them to live amongst you and obey your laws when they're not willing to ask permission to enter? They're going to you're going to break down your front door. They're going to break your first law. And you're going to trust them to live amongst you? Irate. I mean, unbelievable. So who could possibly be fueling that? Well, it just so happens that the majority of these people are coming from Latin American countries. The majority of these people are speaking Spanish. The Spanish is spoken on this continent because of the Spanish conquistadors. And the Spanish conquistadors set up these countries like Mexico, which is the oldest country. It's the original country on of the two continents. Venezuela. The Spanish set up these governments under monarchies. They were located in Spain, and therefore, for instance, when money was paid to the churches and money was paid on taxes, it went back to the queen or the king. But that wasn't the final buck. The final buck ended up in Rome because the Pope controlled the monarchies, and the Pope controlled the monarchy of Spain, Portugal, France, England, and the other countries in Europe. And that was their struggle in the 1500s with Martin Luther. Okay? That was a struggle with the Mayflower. That was a struggle with Henry VIII. And I contend that the struggle has not changed because it is a hidden struggle that Americans just don't realize is happening to their country. So that is what I suspect. I'm simply only echoing the words of Eric John Phelps, a historian based in Philadelphia that has brought this to attention of his listeners. I being one of them. He's a former guest on my show. And I said, boom, that's what makes perfect sense. If it is a religious war, Catholic means universal. If it is your goal to dominate the globe and its occupants, and you don't care how long it takes, and that is the only reason that you live, you study from history and you advance your cause. And if you can flood a Protestant, so let's say, for instance, the United States being a Protestant country, because it is a Protestant country. I know there's a lot of you Catholics out there. I have nothing against Catholicism. I have nothing against any religion whatsoever. And again, like I said, I hate to make this about religion, but that's what makes most sense to me, right? That's what makes most sense to me. Because, right, religion is the oldest form of government of man. It's the oldest form of governing man, interpreting God for man. That's the oldest business on the planet, folks. And you're flooding the borders with people essentially on a chessboard. You're flooding them with papal knights. And they probably don't even realize it. They don't even realize it. You don't realize it. They don't realize it. The only person or group that realizes it is the one that's pushing to allow it to happen in the name of what? I mean, was it today or yesterday? Biden says that he equates it to Nazi Germany refugees, the Jews. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. There's been no other country in the existence of humanity where Jews have not flourished more than in the United States. And frankly, I can tell you, my best friends have always been Jewish. They are a wonderful people. I've known great people that are Catholic. It's not about religion, folks. It's about institutions that control religion, and it's about you as a civilian in the United States and an oath to defend your country, to uphold your Constitution, which calls for freedom of religion. That is what it's all about. So, yes, I'm equating to this invasion on the southern border to a holy war that is being provoked by Francis, a Jesuit, otherwise known as, what is it, Bergoglio? Pardon me if I got the pronunciation wrong. He's an Argentinian. And by the way, I can get into Argentina because the Argentinian, Paraguayan reduction systems of how they conquered the natives down there set the stage from, and this is another Eric John Phelps connection, set the stage for the formulation of Marx's Communist Manifesto, which he created actually in the British Museum with Frederick Engels. Safety, right? Yeah, safety. So what brings safety to people? Freedom brings safety to people. Okay, so we're going to wind down here. Folks, I appreciate you listening. That's another episode of Such Just Guns of Truth. I'll be back in this Wednesday. I'll be back with Robert Spencer. And until then, folks, be awesome.